Greetings, folks. I'm Runways Gamgee, and welcome to Quick and Dirty Roleplay. In this episode, I'm going to conclude my reaction to the Death is Boring video by Vindicast. Let's get to it.
So now that we understand players' needs and fears, we can also look at how lethality, the chance of dying, shapes player psychology. Because the moment players realize the game is lethal, their behavior changes. We've touched on this already. And depending on how the lethality is designed, the change can be good, or it can kill the table's energy completely. So let's break down the main psychological reactions step by step in plain language.
Off the top of my head, I would think that in order for the change to kill the table's mood completely, death would have to be abrupt and not telegraphed beforehand, with a combination of the appropriate amount and or the appropriate intensity of context clues.
Healthy lethality creates caution, which is good.
Fair
When death
lethality.
is possible but reasonable, players will listen. They will take the world serious, they think before acting, they approach danger with respect, they value resources, and they rely on teamwork. This is the ideal state. The threat of death,
I would say that's what the OSR play style seeks to do.
shapes better decisions without suppressing creativity. This is where many old school games shine. Death is possible, but it isn't random, it's earned. And too much lethality creates paranoia, and this is bad. If players believe the GM or the system will kill them at any moment, then every choice is a fear-driven choice, and not fear in the good.
Without having experienced it, but from what I've heard, I'd say this would be the case of the Tomb of Horrors, at least the original incarnation of it.
Way, like a horror game. Fear in a personal decision-making way. Players will take forever to make decisions as well. They will avoid risks, even when the story really begs for it. And they stop trusting.
Why is there a story in the first place before things are played out? You're setting up a railroad here, or at least a script. One that the players have to blindly bump into in order to progress. To me, that's bad game mastering.
The world, they stop trusting the GM, and the pace will slow down to a crawl. And then you get stagnation. Players are no longer excited, and they are constantly bracing for impact. Extreme lethality creates passivity, and this is even worse. When it feels unavoidable, players won't engage any longer. They will sit back and they will watch, and they will stop investing emotionally. They will stop thinking in the longer term. They play dull and safe characters.
It's learned
They
helplessness.
never try anything bold, and this is a psychological dead zone. If players think nothing they do matters, because the game might kill them anyway, they stop trying to influence the world. Passive players are not a result of bad role-playing. They are the predictable result of poorly calibrated danger.
True.
Random lethality creates frustration, and this is the worst of all. When death is both lethal and unpredictable, then players will feel cheated. They stop trusting the system, they blame you as a GM, they mentally just check out, they roll their eyes at danger instead of fearing it, and they may not even come back next session. Random death feels unfair because it isn't tied to decisions. Players accept consequences they earned. They resent
Personally, this is my beef with save or die mechanics. Even though there are times where the employment of such mechanics are appropriate. They calibrate to the high level of danger that presents the save or die mechanic. kind of like you face a Medusa, you stare at her, or you look into her gaze, and then save or get turned to stone. But it's appropriate for Medusa because that's what they do.
Consequences that hit them out of nowhere. And this is why telegraphing danger matters. Surprise deaths rarely create drama, they create resentment.
You sure took a long time to get to this point that I've made multiple times over in this once in this video and then multiple times in my previous videos.
Inconsistent lethality creates mistrust. If the gem sometimes saves players, but other times kills them, and there's no pattern, players become unsure what the game actually wants from them, and this leads to mixed expectations and a confused general tone, inconsistent behavior at the table. I'm not saying that I'm a perfect GM, that I can do this well all the time. I also sometimes feel that even in horror games, that there is not enough danger, that there is not enough death happening. But design or the GM must clearly communicate what kind of danger players should expect. Otherwise you get confusion instead of tension.
Yeah.
Invisible lethality creates blind spots. When a system looks forgiving on paper but is lethal in practice, or the opposite, players will misread the game, and this leads to wrong assumptions, unintended deaths, accidental frustration, and tone mismatch.
Agreed.
Clear, consistent lethality is far more important than high or low lethality.
This is true.
Clarity over severity. Well-calibrated lethality creates heroism. It's maybe a part that is often forgotten, but when danger is real but fair, players become bold. They take heroic
And
risks
clever.
because they trust the consequence structure. And when the game respects them, players try clever plans. They step into dramatic moments, they save each other, they grow attached to their characters, and they invest fully. This is what good danger does. It invites bravery instead of punishing it. So lethality is not about whether characters can die. It's about what the possibility of death makes players do. Too soft, ignore danger. Too harsh, avoid play. Too random,
And too soft, ignore danger, which is stupid gameplay. Or rather, realize that the danger is just a smokescreen.
players stop trusting the world. So we come back to this dial. You need to dial it carefully. So when it's clear and fair and well calibrated, it brings out the best in players. Smart decisions, dramatic moments, meaningful tension, and emotional investment. Good danger inspires courage. Bad danger inspires fear. Psychological difference. So now you're probably thinking, yeah, you've been rambling on and on about...
Good danger would also inspire fear, but the courage is acting despite that fear.
But how do we solve this? How do we design consequence systems that are not binary?
Whereas the bad danger would induce learned helplessness.
Concretely, how do we do this? Because if it's you're fine, dead. No middle, no texture, no psychological build-up. This kind of binary design kills tension because it removes...
I would say 100% that's what D&D hit points are, except that even though having one or more hit points changes nothing in the player character's functionality, it has psychological effects on the player themselves, which would affect their decision making.
Journey between safety and death. So, good consequence systems are slopes. We already talked about the pyramid, That's that slope. So, start with the principle. Consequences must change play and not end it. The best consequences are the ones that linger, or alter how the player thinks, shift how the character operates, create new challenges, or influence future decisions. Death does none of these. But conditions,
That's not true.
scars, stress, depths.
The reason I say that's not true is because you can always roll up a new character, and then your past experiences as a player will shape the behavior of future characters, especially within the same campaign.
Fallout and wounds they do. So those are a few examples of tricks that you can put into your game system. If a consequence changes play instead of stopping it, it can become a storytelling engine. So, a layered...
Play stops when the player stops playing, either voluntarily or involuntary, which is one of the reasons players hate stun conditions so much, because even though it's only a temporary condition that affects the PC, it also it also very obviously affects the player because it robs them of their agency.
Harm system, and not just HP or hit points. Most traditional systems, and mine as well, they rely on when health hits 0, something happens. Death or death saving throws, or something like that. It could be too blunt. Maybe another type of harm system with multiple layers before reaching collapse could be fatigue tracking, or stress meters, or minor wounds, major wounds, critical wounds, corruption or madness levels, injury tables, complications.
With regards to like the wound tracking and fatigue levels, system that immediately comes to mind: Savage Worlds. It does so simply, and there's bite to it, not only due to like your trait rolls are being penalized, making every uncertain action harder to succeed at, but recovery takes a while. Like, to recover from a wound, it takes 5 days, and you can take up to 3 wounds.
That slowly escalate. The key is that each layer needs to have its own texture and its own impact. There are many games that have many different kinds of layers, so it's really difficult to still stay creative and unique in this aspect, but a broken arm should feel different from exhaustion, obviously. What mechanical consequence is there? A curse should feel different from fear.
Not just mechanical consequence, but role-playing consequence. So, yeah, when you have a broken arm, then you shouldn't be able to role-play actions where 2 arms are necessary.
A trauma should feel different from a debt. It's a variety that keeps a game alive between life and death. And then make them persistent. Because, like I said already, death is the opposite of persistence. Persistent consequences, also used sparingly, they create real tension. For example, a wound that reduces your strength until it's treated, or a fear condition that lingers for a session or 2. A debt owed to a faction, a broken item that you can't just easily replace, stress that carries forward into later roles, or a scar that changes how NPCs view the character. something to manage, and not just something you need to avoid through death. Make these consequences also very visible to the players. Not predictable, visible. Players need to see what's happening, what it means, what the next step might be, how they can intervene. This creates informed tension, but unpredictability still matters.
It would also create a new purpose for the affected character in question.
For example, you know your corruption level is rising, but you don't know exactly when it will trigger. You know your wound is getting worse because you failed a few constitution rolls maybe, but you're not sure how bad it will get. This is a balance that will keep you engaged, but not necessarily overwhelmed.
That's what I really like about the Mutants and Masterminds damage system. You get hit, and you fail your toughness saves, and if you only fail them by like less than 5 points, then all you get is a cumulative 1 point penalty to future toughness saves. So even though it's not guaranteed that the next damaging attack you take will really wallop you, there's that tension, like, oh, I'm accumulating, these hits, so the next hit is going to be harder to succeed and harder to succeed. And of course, hero points, like, they negate that to a large degree, but that's besides the point.
Then you need to tie consequences to decisions, not just dice. A consequence should feel like the result of a risk taken, a choice made, a plan attempted, an opportunity pursued. Not simply the product of random chance. When players feel ownership over the risk, the consequences they feel earned. And earned consequences never feel unfair. The most simple example would be I jumped down the elevator shaft. Well, you fall to your death. I heard that. That was probably fair.
Pan camera,
Players understand
bird's eye view.
The risks
You
they
died.
take when they make a decision. Maybe not always, but then it's up to the GM to telegraph this. Ensure consequences spark new story and not just close it off. Non-binary design and the real magic of it. A good consequence system doesn't punish failure. It creates new content. A wound
punishes
forces a
failure
party
as well.
to find a healer. A cursed item draws the attention of a cult. A failed negotiation creates a rival. Stress causes a breakdown that reveals a hidden truth. Depth ties you to a faction in new ways. Or a critical injury forces the party to change tactics. While death is just the end. Good consequences are the start of something new.
If the death of the party does not equal the death of the campaign, death is not the end. Whenever possible, try not to make the death of the party equal the death of the campaign. Remember, run your campaign as an anthology in order to prevent this from happening.
Make it overly complex, though. The danger with non-binary systems is over-design. Think about it too much, overthinking. You don't need dozens of tables and 40 conditions or 12 meters. Players don't want a medical chart. Maybe some do. I'm not judging. Instead, try to aim for a few broad consequence types, each with meaningful impact, easy to track, easy to remember, and easy to narrate. Simplicity with weight is much better than highly detailed stuff with clutter. So to create meaningful tension, you need more than hit points and death. You need steps, layers, shades, and textures of harm. A good consequence system keeps players in the narrative, and it changes how they play. It deepens the fiction, it shapes decision making, and it creates drama organically.
I agree.
Death is only interesting at the top of a well-built consequence ladder. If the ladder has only 2 rungs, live and dead, you're missing the entire middle where the storytelling lives.
As I previously mentioned with hit points, uh, that ladder doesn't always have to be on the game mechanics side. You know, what could look like a lack of like the ladder from fine to death on the game mechanics side is actually taking place in the player's head. And if it achieves that same effect, then there may not be a need to add like a mechanical ladder behind it, or worse, it may just increase cognitive load.
Alright, I think that's where we'll leave it for today. I hope it was informative, or at the very least, I hope that it gave you something to think about the next time you decide whether to wipe the party or just inconvenience them creatively. If you take only one thing with you, let it be this: never kill your players, but sometimes their characters, that's negotiable. Thanks for sticking around until the end. If your characters...
If I kill my players, I will never admit it. But yeah, I mean, at the end, as he wraps up, I'm reminded of a time. Let me see, back in 2011, I ran a Star Wars Knights of the Republic game for a group of friends who it seemed like they hadn't played KOTOR. I think one of them might have, but I run them through basically like the plot of the game, to serve as a basis, not as a railroad. So if they wanted to do something different, then they could. So they reached the point where, they crash land on Terrace. They managed to bypass the Sith guard that's guarding the elevator from the upper levels to the lower levels. They get to the lower levels, and then they get to the cantina, where that bounty hunter is the short guy with like the circular shaded glasses. He's supposed to be like a badass bounty hunter, and they play that scene where like these alien thugs are trying to harass him, and he starts his countdown: 1, and the alien's like, oh, 1. We're like, what are you counting down? Like 2. Like, oh, 2, huh? Oh, we see you can count. 1, 2, 3, huh? 3, and then he just like decimates them. And the party tries to interact with him, and just like with the other aliens, he tells them, out of my way. And they continue, and he starts to count down: 1, and just like with the other group, they went to 3. So there was a literal, first of all, there was a preview of what happens when you mess with this guy, and also of what messing with this guy looks like. Then the player characters are put pretty much in the same exact situation, and then they do the same exact things. So once he counts to 3, I ask everyone to roll initiative, get initiative order. I believe this character's name is Calo Nord. I may be mistaken. It's been a long time. And so the player characters are, I believe, like 2nd or 3rd level. I think 2nd level. We were playing, if I recall correctly, we were playing the Saga Edition of Star Wars. And this character, I had his stat sheet, and if I recall correctly, he's 7th level. And he just mops the floor the entire party, and a TPK occurs. Now, because of like the situation, or rather, because of the nature of KOTOR, that was the end of the campaign. And I don't recall if the players felt gypped or not, but in my opinion, they shouldn't have. I mean, I figured at the time, me being the youngest person there, like in, let me see, my early 30s, and everyone else being like late 30s to early 60s. It was like a group of like 5 or 6 people. I don't know. They won the Darwin Award basically. All right, so yeah, that concludes my reaction to Vindicast's Death is Boring video. It seems it took until like around the very end to reach the points um, that I was making during my reaction. Let me see, a bit of a brain fart here. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to comment and keep it respectful and relevant. Until next time, take care, folks, and play to find out what happens.